So I was doing the research into perspective and perception kind of came up most often. And with perception, the idea is just learning how we see based on previous imagery. So if we've seen something before, we kind of keep it in the back of our mind. And whenever we see a new object or a new thing on previous memories, and kind of fill in information to what we're looking at. I guess for one example is just when you see a cube or any kind of rectangle, you can never see all sides of the object at the same time. And you just remember what you've seen on the back side. So you fill in and assume that it's a complete solid object based on memory. So that's kind of what I started with for these prints. So then I've taken that idea and tried to break down into just simple shapes, simple forms. So with these prints on this wall here, this whole series, I take an abstract, kind of two-dimensional shape, and then once those shapes are put in the correct orientation and put next to each other, they can create a three-dimensional object. Going with the basic one, kind of the printing process, the black shapes, moving into the color, and then the multiple layers, and rearranging to create shape. With is printmaking is generally a two-dimensional medium, so this kind of gave me an outlet to force three-dimensional objects and make the space kind of come alive and come off the paper. So that's why I've been sticking a lot with printmaking, and especially this print here, I've started actually pulling the paper out to give it more dimension and more space. Frames, the reason I wanted to go with these frames to isolate the prints is it then makes that more of an object and more of a piece itself, and not just the image, but the paper becomes part of. Does anyone have questions?
I was going to ask about your choice to do the holes in the top, the way you bought those.
Yeah, so those are the registration holes that are used to register the print. And that kind of made it more evident going from the multiple shapes on one, using those registration pins to orient the page in the correct location, to then get the image at the end is the final three-dimensional object.
Okay.
And it kind of shows, I was hoping it would show more of the process that it all comes from the same blank sheet of paper, and it's all just rearranged.
Okay.
And this was a way to kind of display those registration pins instead of cutting them off, as a lot of times people do, just remove that portion of the print.
Yeah, they seem really intentional. I mean, I like them not knowing that they're registration marks. Yeah. They just feel like it's an extra added element to your piece.
And that was the one thing is where I know other printmakers may recognize those and other people would have no clue. So maybe I need to find a way to make that more clear that those are registration.
I mean, I definitely got that they all have the same markings, so they all came from maybe similar. But I didn't know it was from that technique of the registration marks.
Nice.
Can you talk more about that installation?
Yes. So this installation has more to do with perspective than perception. And I've always been interested in constellations and stars. And constellation Orion is one of my favorites, so that's the one I was kind of working with. And when we see the stars from Earth, they look like a flat image, so we see it, we kind of trace the lines in between it. But in actuality, those stars are in completely different locations. They're further or closer to the Earth. So this installation shows us from the one point closest to the window is if you're looking through that hole, it shows you what Orion would look like from Earth, from our specific point in space. But anywhere else you move, those stars then begin to shift into their different locations. So this is kind of more going to show the importance of perspective in your single location when you're viewing an object or viewing something.
Your prints, do you feel like you want to do more work in that? And just another related question, are you going to stay with just kind of abstract shapes, or are you ever going to move into something that's a little more recognizable in the real world? And maybe why or not?
I've thought about that, but I kind of like the idea of sticking with the simple shapes because it's easier for me at least to kind of break down the concepts and ideas behind this pulling things apart. That once you use realistic images, it kind of weights and loads the image and what you're seeing, so it's harder, it gets further away from. I guess, the concept of reconstructing and recollecting ideas.
Can you talk about the color? Because a lot of things are monochromatic, and like how the transition to
With-
these are newer.
With the newer series, well, in the past I'd always done white ink. They just used a transparent white ink and then layered it on top of itself to make it darker and darker. So it starts out, this is one layer of white, then this is 2 layers, and then these are 3 layers, just right on top of each other to make them stand out a little more, just to give you a different tone. And then I had done a large series in the white ink, so I wanted to try something moving into color. And with these older prints, they weren't overlapping the shapes. This is one shape and this is a separate shape, instead of printing directly on top of the other. So I wanted to try with the new ones to overlap the images and get a kind of gradation in the tone that way. And I just used basic colors directly for the CMYK, just kind of like a call out to printing and how a lot of printing is done.
So do you feel you can give like more information using color?
I didn't know that I could get more information. I feel like they would work the same way with white ink. I just wanted to try something in color, which I hadn't done recently.
And what do you think?
Kind of like them more, but I'm not sure. I feel like I could go either way.
Does it reference at all like how we perceive color as well?
It wasn't something so much that I was thinking of more than shape, because I was more interested in how we perceive the 3-dimensional form, not so much the color. But in doing this research in perception and perspective, the ideas of seeing colors in different lights did come up, but I haven't done any work into that.
So I'm curious about those 2 in the back. Were those planned, or were those 2, were they mixed up, were they, like, did you plan that, or was that a reaction that you were making?
So the first one was just kind of the part of the process. I had the registration, those little grid marks you can see where I was able to orient and make sure everything was centered. And I just kind of liked that idea. It was similar to these other prints where they're all the different shapes laid on top of each other, so it's kind of even more abstracted. And then the more I looked at that, the more I thought of doing it again with the colors from the final shapes and overlapping those to just give a little more definition to which each shape is and where it falls into place.
And then can you talk a bit about, like, the fact that you have the black starting? Like, what were you thinking? I guess it goes with the color. Like, is there a reason, like, you could have done them all the same color in a sense? What
I think
does it represent?
with the black, it was just kind of a way to emphasize the form itself and the shape, and then moving on to the color was just kind of to let you know that this is kind of a process and that this will move on.
It's sort of the progression of how sight develops, though, isn't it? Like, babies kind of see things in black and white, and then they sort of begin to recognize color.
I'm not certain about color, but I know just with objects, they see something that's completely new and foreign to them, but they learn to recognize like the shape of a bottle, and they know they're going to be fed. They see this every day, but the first few times they probably wouldn't recognize what it is, but as they experience more, they remember that shape, they remember what it is, and they can expect to be fed.
I see those 2 like kind of perception at night and day in a way, the same kind of formal shape, but how like at night you see silhouettes and like your actual colors of things and you put things together a little bit differently because you only can gather so much information depending on the time of day. You see any kind of narrative with that going on kind of Justin's question as well.
With time of day? Or
Yeah, just
I mean,
how the perception changes, like how you see something depending on lighting.
I think that's just a natural effect of something that happens. So we can maybe see our experience with seeing things from the morning to nighttime. We can recall that. I guess I'm not quite certain what the question, I'm not sure.
Maybe
feel like I've been back to the connection to, not so much CMYK, which it is, but then the, the visual color mixing, like when there's no light.
It's because it's dependent on the light source you're in and where you are, even just like how tired and awake you are. Things will change based on your personal experience.
You talk about that particular piece, it seems like an anomaly within all frame pieces, like nothing is coming together, it's already all there, but what's with the arcs and what is that reference?
This one, the arcs were just in a way to demonstrate the ending of the shape. There's dissecting forms, basically dissecting this rectangular shape. And those circles in the background were just kind of a way to delineate the backside of the form without making a straight line. And that comes from an older series where I was using a lot more circular shapes instead of just hard edges. Any other questions?
So where do you see this going? This series, continuing this or?
Yeah, I feel like there's just a lot more possibilities moving into what I was doing here with folding the paper, using light itself and possibly bending shapes and getting more shadow into play. And I think moving forward, I would want to make it more dimensional, not just leave it flat on the paper, but find ways to make the paper itself come out.
But how dimensional is that? Like, are you really talking?
I mean, not
folding, or-
much more than a few inches, 5 or 6, but
It's definitely.
yeah.